Hello everyone, this is Shadow Dragon from the DCUO community. So now it's been about 2.5 months into the stats revamp. I've been wanting to do a review video for quite some time now, but I haven't figured out how to really do it, and this is actually like the fourth attempt. I've tried to wing it, but it ended up too long, going on tangents. So I'm going to try to keep this really basic, not going into any specific powers or even details. This is just a general revamp review, and I will do follow-up videos for other details later on. And just a quick note that the video playing in the background here are just going to be random clips of gameplay early into the revamp going live. So this is probably, it's going to be clips within the first week or so. So first of all, I am still in the game, but I can't really say that's a statement on the revamp though, because something I've learned is that I'm pretty much going to stick with this game as long as enough of my league is in it, and that still holds true. So, I mean, I do think there are good and bad things about the revamp, but I'm still going to be in it no matter what. So if we look at the way my league reacted to the revamp, we had a bunch of people come back like just before, because obviously they heard the news of the revamp. So a lot of players who haven't played the game for years came back just before the revamp to prepare for it. And then players in the game who didn't feel like they would be comfortable with the revamp either complained about it and stayed, or a few of them did leave, but I would say more came back than left. And the people that came back are still there after this time period of 2.5 months. So the overall population number is the same in League, but it's just different people. There's just been like a shift. But some of the players that either reduced time or have not logged on may not have been due to the revamp though, because I started noticing a drop-off at Age of Justice. So that's probably a factor too. But I did have a handful of like unofficial exit interviews, so there are people that I know for a fact left the game, but or are on extended break. I never really count people out, because it's pretty common in our league for someone to come back after years, as we see with people who didn't play during the AM era coming back now. So the effect on the league, I would say overall, is neutral, because there wasn't a mass exodus when we got the revamp, and it wasn't a change that kind of blew away the game and made it way better. So definitely neutral on this aspect. And naturally, one of the first things we had to do when this hit was speccing and respecking. So I'm going to start with that. And this is definitely one of the good, if not best, things about the revamp. The way they moved around the stats, and the process of respecking is much easier, much faster. It's simple, easy to understand, because before we had innate stats all over the place across the various weapon styles, and the only way to accurately keep track of that was to actually do it on paper. But now that it's all in one place, like, speccing is so much faster. Like, to give you an idea, I actually got through all of my characters, even the ones I'm not using, on the first day of the revamp. So that's 18 characters, and each of those has 4 to 6 armories. So that would normally be a lot of speccing under the old system. I never would have gotten through that within one day. So yeah, definitely one of the best things, especially after the patch they made where you could assign multiple skill points to um, a certain item. So now you could literally do it in under a minute. Like if you're used to what you're gonna pick. After setting skill points, the next thing up would be your powers and your loadout. So with powers now everything is open up. You don't have the 15 power points to make a decision on, and then you don't have to qualify for like a higher power by buying like lower powers and using up and basically throwing away points. Now we have the entire suite of powers open from the beginning. So overall, this is a good thing. It does make it kind of more confusing. I mean, there's definitely less guidance because before there was, especially with AMs, there was pretty much one way to go. And if you look at classic DCUO before AMs, while you could choose a variety of powers, there was still guidance because of the 15 power point restriction and working the way up the tree. But with all that opened up, there's almost total freedom. But it does mean that you have to do more work and you have to do more experimenting and figure out like what's good for your play style. And of course power management, because you don't want to like spec into all power hungry powers and then just run out. So there are definitely other aspects to it. And but having custom loadouts is definitely a positive. And the thing about this is it's also going to vary from power to power, because some of them will have more, you could call it restrictions or guidance, I guess, because like when you restrict, you're also guiding people. So opening up powers for the revamp, what does that actually do? For custom loadouts and roleplay builds, it's definitely a positive. Does it solve the issue of balance? That remains to be seen. Because while reducing the damage and taking away like AM bonus, that is going to help in balance. But was it needed though? Because since it was like a big disparity in damage between AM and not AM before, a simple adjustment of the numbers probably would have solved that instead of going through the revamp. However, opening up all powers, I actually think that puts more variables into it. Because now instead of one way of working a power set, you're going to have like hundreds of combinations. So if you try to balance that, I don't think that's going to be successful in the long run. Now, the thing about the revamp though is if something is imbalanced, it's not going to be drastically imbalanced, as it was with AM versus non-AM before. So I don't know. This is it's kind of neutral, and the devs will just have to go by traffic reports and analytics for it, I guess. Now, some of the in-game feedback and parts of exit interviews that I've had with people leaving are unhappy largely have to do with people that were playing the higher end powers before, the ones that were imbalanced and overpowered compared to most. And that was kind of expected, because if you're used to one thing and all of a sudden you're much weaker after an update, that's going to affect you, especially if it's your main character. The other important aspect about this is sometimes it takes time, because one of my top characters was using one of the top tiered powers before and got weakened. And if you look at the power ratings done by some of the community number crunchers, some of the top tiered powers are now at the lower end, and some of the lower ones kind of switch places with them. So that's going to be very different depending on what you play and what you play on one of your main characters. So on the flip side, like, a lot of the people who stuck with the lower end powers are very happy with the revamp. But for the people that left, I can totally understand that, because if fire was broken enough in some way, that would seriously cause me to consider leaving the game. But I always try to be patient with this one, and I think there's a lot of experimenting to do. And I'm going to try to keep this as general as possible, but one of the... I've had a couple of comments about one of the previous OP powers, and one of the players left because of it. However, I play on a daily basis with another player who uses the same power and hasn't switched out of it. So sometimes it takes time to tailor it to your playstyle. And it's probably true that it might not work for some people, because there are just lots of different playstyles. But it can also take a lot of time, because if we look at the full suite of DCUO powers, like, I picked up some of them right away. Basically the ones that I played before AMs were introduced, like, those seem to be easier to adjust to. And then some of the others that I played more heavily during the AM era had a much longer adjustment period, and some of them almost up until now. So two and a half months in, I was still adjusting. On some of my characters, I'm pretty sure I'm going to win that armory imprinting statue in the league halls. But I'm at a point where I'm comfortable with most of the powers. I still have a lot of my lower characters on hold. But yeah, something I want to stress is that some of these powers did take me 1 or 2 months to get used to. So I would start out with a projected new loadout, revert back to my old one and try to get that working. Experiment with hybrid versus superpowered across the various powers, because those affect playstyles. Like, if you have a certain playstyle that chains a lot of powers, you might want to go one way versus another. There's just a lot of aspects and a lot of different combinations to experiment with. And then, like, once you have a combination, you have to try it out long term in a lot of content. So it's been a very long process. So that being said, the time of the learning curve is also a factor. I could totally understand somebody leaving the game because of a requirement to be able to get used to a power that may take a month or two, should someone have to go through that for a video game change, for a large update. That's going to vary from person to person and real life schedule. So totally understandable if somebody leaves for that reason. Another popular exit interview item, as well as people that are still in the game but complaining about it, is the issue of knockdowns and kind of the flow of combat. And I've talked about this since my very first Revamp video on the test server, how the combat feels more primitive with less knockdowns. And And we really see that through like all the tiers of content now that it's live. So the result is we're getting controlled more by the enemy, and we're unable to knock down as much as we used to. And I've actually tailored a lot of my loadouts to get as many knockdowns as possible because that's my playstyle. So that I would say is a pretty big adjustment, and overall it's not the best version of DCUO. I would say combat was at its peak, close to the classic version, but with the addition of weapon mastery. It was the AMs that I felt ruined it more, because that basically gave us a single loadout. But what the AMs did that was good was there was a good flow and rhythm to chaining moves together. So that part of it is gone. I don't think it had to disappear. Like if they just retained what the moves used to do. I mean, there's strategy and skill behind knockdowns, and it goes into like setting up the opponent and then getting your heavy hit after the knockdown. So that can still exist, but it's much more limited than it used to be. And I don't know, the game just doesn't feel good like that. Like when you're spamming so many moves and then the opponent just doesn't even get staggered. There should be like some consistency and formula to like when an opponent gets staggered. And we see this in other games. Like they first start out with very strong like resistance, and then after you hit them a few times and you get used to this, like there's a way to consistently stagger them after a certain point, and then sometimes they'll recover. So we see this in other games, but here after the revamp, it's like you're both standing up and just hitting each other, and it feels cheesy, because like you're kind of getting cheesed by the enemy, and then the way to beat him is to out cheese him. So I think combat overall took a step back. Like there is skill in the way we're using the powers now, but the result of the hits, there's just less skill, and it's definitely uglier. If you're like recording video of combat and you compare it to the AM era and the classic version of DCUO, the revamp definitely isn't the best as far as like rhythm and flow. And combat is a pretty big factor in action MMOs, and a lot of people will cite DCUO as the best, or definitely one of the top ones. So this is a major hit, like with the revamp making it worse. But surprisingly, there's enough of the game to carry it and keep it appealing. Like when I look at it, I would my snap judgment would be that combat would be a quitting point, but I'm still into like the customization and collecting styles, collecting base items and building bases, and that's kind of my motivation. And then obviously with the majority of the league still intact, and I'm pretty active, it's enough to keep me in there. And there's always hope that with feedback they make adjustments. I mean, I still think the combat is okay because it does somewhat resemble the classic version of DCUO, so in that sense I'm able to adjust. So it's not that much worse, but I could see it as a quitting point, and it is common enough from feedback that I've been given for both people that are still in and people that have left. So I think I'll cut off this video here. Upcoming ones will probably deal with the content in general, and then probably another video to review how I fared with. But in the comments below, I would be curious to know if you're sticking with the game after the revamp, if you left or if you came back. If you did come back, I would be curious to know like what era of DCUO you are familiar with. I consider classic DCUO from the day of launch up until the first advanced mechanic, which was quantum. And then the whole period of, I guess, the past 2 years was the advanced mechanics period, where all powers got one, and you got the power buff by using it. Let's see. Also, I would like to know what power you used mainly, because I just want to see if all of this is in line with the movement within my league. But until next video, thanks for watching.